7 years into our corporate marriage, Serena Vance came into possession of 3 matches that could take her back to the past. She looked as if a massive weight had been lifted off her shoulders as she struck the first one. "Justin Miller, don't even think about hounding me this time. I'm going back to win over the one who got away. From here on out, our paths diverge. You and I are nothing to each other." When we both landed 7 years in the past, I simply nodded. I watched Serena walk away toward Julian Price, the boy she'd always loved. Then, clutching my aching stomach, I washed down a cheap grocery store sandwich with a bottle of cold water. To my surprise, Serena came storming back. She slammed a lunchbox down in front of me, her face flushed with rage. "Do you have any idea how many years I spent getting your health on track? And now you're back to eating this garbage?" When I got home to a pitch-black living room, I had a sinking feeling. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Serena. "See me in the study." Our last message was from 2 weeks ago, on her mother's birthday. Serena had pulled up in front of my office building and sent 2 words, "Come down." Like many business merger marriages, Serena and I didn't have much of a foundation. On the day we signed the papers, my impression of her was still stuck in our school days. The arrogant, filthy rich socialite who did whatever she wanted. I'm sure her impression of me was just as simple. The quiet, poorly dressed scholarship kid. Except that poor kid turned out to be the long-lost heir to a massive estate, and I was brought back into the fold just in time to be married off to her. I went from nothing to everything overnight, tied to her by a contract. Serena had a white moonlight, the one who got away. Even after 7 years, his photo sat on her nightstand. I still remember how she once tried to win a smile from Julian by using a fleet of drones to spell his name in the sky, showering the entire campus in rose petals. After the spectacle ended, students scrambled to pick up the discarded flowers from the ground. I picked one up too. The first rose I ever received in my life came from a rich girl's desperate attempt to buy a prince's heart. To her, I was just a background character, an extra in her grand romance. For some reason, though, after Julian moved abroad, Serena never went after him. I changed into my slippers, wondering idly if even loveless marriages hit a 7-year itch. Serena had endured this for 7 years. I figured she was finally going to ask for a divorce. Only a small desk lamp was lit in the study. Serena's expression was unreadable in the shadows. A document sat on the desk, along with 3 completely out-of-place matches. I didn't even look at the document. I instinctively reached for a pen. "Where's the pen? I'll sign now. I don't have any issues with the terms." The Vance family lawyers were the best in the industry. I was sure the paperwork was airtight. "Sign? Sign what?" Serena's voice sounded strange. She pushed the document toward me. "Didn't you give me this?" Looking at the familiar handwriting on the contract, it suddenly hit me. Neither of us had wanted this marriage. So, on the day we got our license, I had a lawyer draft a divorce agreement. I made 2 copies, signed them both, and gave them to Serena as a wedding gift. She could end the relationship whenever she wanted. "I lost my copy years ago. I'm surprised you kept yours in such good condition," I said. Serena stared into my eyes. "So, for 7 years you've been thinking about leaving me?" She didn't wait for an answer. She picked up one of the matches and struck it. "I met a con artist today who told me these were 3 matches that could take me back to the past. If she was telling the truth, then for the first match, I'm going back to get the one who got away. Don't you dare follow me. From now on, we're done. Our lives won't touch." As the match burned out, a wave of dizziness hit me. When I opened my eyes, I was back. Someone held a cupcake out to me. "Here, it's like something out of a movie." Serena bought cupcakes for the whole class just so she'd have an excuse to give one to Julian. Seeing that I wasn't moving, the classmates set the cupcake on my desk. The entire classroom smelled like sweet vanilla frosting. The cupcake was beautifully packaged, the box sporting an expensive designer logo. We should thank Julian. Otherwise, we'd never get to taste something this fancy. "Hey, Julian, isn't your birthday coming up? What kind of gift did Serena get you?" Not far away, Julian Price's ears turned slightly red. He tried to protest that he and Serena were just friends, but the smile in his eyes was unmistakable. "So, Serena's first match had brought her back to this day. She and Julian were in that more-than-friends phase everyone knew, but no one had said it yet. Serena had planned to confess on Julian's birthday. But on that day, I found out about my real family and was dragged back to the Miller estate. Then came the engagement, the license, the wedding, and Julian moved abroad, never to be heard from again. Just as Serena hoped, she had returned to the day before our lives became entangled. I smoothed out my old school uniform. It was one of the few decent pieces of clothing I owned, and I wore it year-round. "Aren't you going to eat it?" my desk mate asked. "Do you need a spoon? I have an extra." Julian, looking like he'd found a lifeline to escape the teasing, stood up and hurried over to hand me a plastic spoon. Julian. At that moment, a familiar figure appeared at the door. Serena's chest was heaving, her breath ragged. Seeing Julian standing next to me, her pupils constricted. She marched over to us. "I texted you. Why didn't you answer?" Julian looked startled by her intensity. "What? I haven't checked my phone. Is something wrong?" I thought 7 years of marriage would have made me forget what the teenage Serena looked like. In a school full of trust fund brats, Serena was the rare socialite who wasn't insufferable. She had a sharp, vibrant energy, bold and radiant, yet perfectly composed. Now, this Serena, the one who had traveled back from the future, stole a glance at me. Her eyes lingered on my worn-out uniform for a split second before she looked away. What else could be wrong? She grabbed Julian's wrist and started pulling him toward the door. "We haven't seen each other in hours, and I missed you. Have you eaten? I just finished practice and I'm starving. Come with me?" "But I just had a cupcake." "I don't care. You're coming with me." Their silhouettes faded into the distance. My desk mate rubbed his arms. "God, they're so intense. They aren't even dating yet. Imagine how sickeningly sweet they'll be once they're official." "Hey, you're really not eating that?" I shook my head. "You take it. I have some things to do at the library." This time, Serena didn't want to marry me, and I didn't want to be a pawn for the Miller family again. I still had time. I had to find a way to save myself. I didn't expect to run into Serena and Julian in the library. They were huddled close together, flipping through a book. Serena pointed to a photo in the book and lowered her voice. "This city looks nice. The flowers are beautiful. What if we study abroad here?" Julian made a face and pointed to a different page. "Who picks a school based on flowers? If we're going abroad, I want to go here." This was the quiet study room. Amidst the low hum of students memorizing notes, their voices were soft, but I heard them clearly. I clutched my books and tried to walk past them quickly. But Julian called out to me. They were arguing over which university was better. Julian, catching my eye, stood up and blocked my path. "Justin, settle this for us. Which of these schools looks better?" I hadn't even dared to dream about studying abroad. Not when I was a nobody, and certainly not after I became a Miller. Looking at the two unfamiliar photos, my fingers tightened around my books. "Just drop it." The book snapped shut. Serena leaned her head on her hand, her eyes half-lidded. "Why are you asking him? We're the ones going abroad, not him. Besides," Serena added with a cold sneer, "does he even understand what he's looking at?" The last comment was unnecessarily blunt. I bit my lip, ready to reply, when the girl sitting diagonally across from us spoke up first. "Is going abroad supposed to make you special?" She stood up and began packing her things. "Or is it a crime to not be obsessed with it?" I remembered her, Leah Sterling, the top student who was here on a full ride. She was quiet and kept to herself. I'd only ever exchanged a few words with her. The next time I'd hear her name after graduation, I would be climbing the ranks at Miller Corp, and she would be a world-renowned tech mogul. Leah brushed past me and walked out, leaving a trail of tension in her wake. Julian finally realized how awkward things were. He gave Serena a frustrated nudge. "Justin, don't mind her. Serena talks before she thinks, but she doesn't mean anything by it. Apologize to him." Serena's gaze followed Leah until she disappeared. Only then did she look back, offering a half-hearted, "Sorry." I didn't respond. I grabbed my things and left. The Miller family business had been on a downward spiral for years. They were desperate for cash, which was why they'd remembered the old verbal marriage pact between the grandfathers. They were already looking for me, the discarded son, to use as a sacrificial lamb in their corporate war. By now, the Millers probably already suspected my identity. If I wanted to stay hidden, I had to avoid the mandatory school physical the day after tomorrow. Taking a leave of absence would be too suspicious. On the day of the checkup, I used a fever as an excuse and asked my friend Ben to call it in for me. But nothing was ever that simple. Soon after, I got a text from the teacher. A fever wasn't a big deal, he said. He suggested I come in just to finish the basic paperwork. I'll send a student to pick you up. Just wait downstairs. My heart began to race. I changed my clothes and went down, my mind spinning with desperate thoughts. Maybe Serena's first match had been a waste. I couldn't escape this on my own. Unless Justin Miller. Serena came running toward me. I stared at her, dazed, before I felt the back of her hand pressed against my forehead. You don't have a fever. Her chest was still heaving from the run. We were so close I could feel the warmth of her breath against my jaw. Serena stepped back, her expression complicated. Then why didn't you show up for the physical? Her tone shifted. Did you come back, too? So, Serena hadn't realized I'd traveled back with her. My phone rang. It was the teacher calling to check on me. Serena, did you find Justin? You can't go into the guy's dorm, so I'll send someone else. The checkups have started, don't let him be late. Serena answered without missing a beat. It's okay, Mr. Henderson. I found him. His fever is really bad, I'm taking him to the hospital right now. She hung up, grabbed my wrist, and pulled me toward a secluded area of the campus. Her grip was so tight it hurt. She stopped abruptly. Why didn't you go? You know the Millers are looking for you. Don't you want to go back and be the young master of the Miller estate? I had thrown on a random jacket before coming down. I laughed. And you? Do you want me to go back? Julian said if you confessed on his 20th birthday, he'd say yes. That's only a few days away. If I'm found by the Millers now, you and he will end up exactly like last time, you in an arranged marriage and him moving across the ocean. I rubbed my wrist behind my back. Serena, don't tell me you came here because you were worried about me being sick. We rarely spoke face to face like this. You came here to stop me from going to that physical, didn't you? Serena's face turned pale for a moment. She let out a dry laugh. Yeah. So, should I expect a thank you? Thanks for not hounding me this time? For stepping aside for Julian and me? You're welcome, I said flatly. That seemed to make her even angrier. The harsh words were over, and we stood there in a tense silence. I pulled my old jacket tighter and coughed. I was actually starting to feel a bit cold. Don't worry. I'll do my best to avoid the Millers until after you've confessed. I hope you both get what you want this time. I hope you're happy forever. She sat down on the concrete steps. Just to be safe, you're staying with me until the physicals are over. Put your jacket on properly. If you actually get a fever, I don't want to owe you a favor. Serena didn't want to owe me anything, and she didn't want any more ties between us. A clean break was better for everyone. In those 7 years of marriage, we had been polite strangers. We had never sat together on a staircase just passing the time. We barely even spent time in the same room. In the mornings, I'd go to the kitchen for breakfast after she'd already left for the office. At night, I'd get home at 9, and she'd retreat to the study to avoid me. A question that had been buried in my heart began to resurface. Serena, yeah, do you really love Julian? It was hard to believe someone as defiant as Serena would willingly trap herself in a loveless corporate marriage. After Julian left the country, she never looked for him. When old classmates mentioned his name, she didn't react. Other than that old photo on her nightstand, I never saw a single sign that she actually loved him. How could I not love him? The question was like a drop of water in boiling oil. Serena snapped back instantly. When he was sad, I spelled his name with drones and showered him in roses to make him smile. When he wouldn't accept a gift from me, I bought treats for the whole class just so he could have a cupcake. How could I? Serena suddenly stopped. Her face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions. Finally, she looked down at her watch and said hurriedly, "The physicals are over." 3 days later was Julian's birthday. As the only son of the Price family, Julian was the quintessential golden boy. His 20th birthday was a massive affair. The whole class was invited, and several buses were rented to take everyone to the venue. I didn't plan on going. I went back to my dorm. That's when I realized I'd forgotten my keys, and the dorm supervisor was out. Ben finally texted me back half an hour later. "Justin, we're all at Julian's party. It's gonna be a late one. Since it's the weekend, why don't you just go home and sleep there?" I agreed, but I didn't actually go home. As the library emptied out, I followed the crowd and left. If I could just get through today, Serena would confess. She would be with Julian. And once she had a boyfriend, the ridiculous marriage pact between our families would be void. I found a park bench and sat down, but my stomach began to cramp. I went to a nearby convenience store for a bottle of water and a sandwich. I'd known since I was a kid that education was my only way out. I often forgot to eat because I was too busy studying. Eventually, I developed chronic stomach issues. I never learned my lesson. Even after I joined Miller Corp, I only got busier. Once, I passed out during a board meeting and woke up in a hospital bed. When I opened my eyes, Serena was sitting nearby, crossing her legs and flipping through a hospital brochure. "Sorry for the trouble," I'd croaked. Serena nodded. "It was a huge hassle. So Justin, don't get sick again." From that day on, the housekeeper at home started bringing lunch to my office every day. She changed the menu constantly, but if I ate a little more of a certain dish, it was guaranteed to show up again the next day. I tore open the sandwich wrapper, thinking that if I ever got the chance, I'd hire that housekeeper myself. Her cooking was exactly to my taste. As I was thinking that, a shadow fell over me. Thud. A lunchbox was slammed down onto the bench next to me. The dim streetlights made Serena's face look blurry. My eyes widened. I couldn't believe she was standing there. This younger version of her almost overlapped with the softened version of Serena from 7 years in the future. She looked annoyed. "What are you looking at? I spent years fixing your health. You think I'm gonna let you eat that garbage?" As soon as the words left her mouth, Serena looked like she regretted them. She avoided my gaze. "I just came to make sure you weren't doing anything stupid to mess up my confession to Julian. This is just some takeout I grabbed. I have to go cut the cake now, so you might as well have it." I set the sandwich aside and opened the lunchbox. Just as I suspected, it was filled with all the dishes I'd once told the housekeeper I loved. In that moment, I didn't know if I was more shocked or heartbroken. Maybe during those 7 years, in some corner I couldn't see, Serena actually had felt something for me. I pulled myself together. "Thanks. Don't worry. There are only 4 hours left. I'll stay hidden from the Millers." I pointed to her vibrating phone. "Someone's looking for you." Just then, my own phone rang. It was an unknown number. When I answered, my foster mother's voice came through, trembling. "Justin, are you still at school? Why don't I come pick you up? You haven't been home in so long. Your sister and I, we really miss you." My foster mother never said things like that. A year after they adopted me, she and her husband had their own biological child. Their tiny apartment became even more cramped. The living room couch became my bed. They usually preferred it if I didn't come back at all. For her to call me now meant the Millers had found me. I hung up and looked at Serena. "Go back and confess. If you don't go now, it'll be too late." The Millers would be at the school any minute. I started walking toward the dorms, then realized I couldn't go there. A car pulled up slowly at the school gates. I recognized it instantly. It was a Miller family car. Even if Serena went back now, she needed time. I couldn't let them find me yet, or everything would be ruined. In this massive campus, I suddenly didn't know where to go. I just ran, the wind whistling in my ears. Finally, I ducked behind the abandoned lab building. The back of the building was covered in vibrant trumpet creepers, blooming wildly. Justin Miller. I sat with my knees pulled up to my chest and looked up. Serena was standing there, holding the lunchbox, looking furious. "Why the hell are you running? You haven't even eaten. Of all the people who would rather suffer than eat, you're the worst." She grumbled as she walked over and forced a pair of chopsticks into my hand. "Eat." Don't say a word until you're finished. She wouldn't let me speak, but she wouldn't stop talking herself. You're smart, so you probably figured it out. Those meals I had delivered to your office? I cooked them myself and made the housekeeper take them. But let's get one thing straight. I didn't do it because I liked you. I was just bored and wanted to practice my cooking. Besides, our family's interests were tied together back then. I couldn't have you dying on me. Today, I just happened to cook too much. I didn't want it to go to waste, so I brought it to you. And you're such a picky eater. You won't touch greens if they have a hint of garlic. But you love garlic scallops. Like, do you like garlic or not? Serena's voice trailed off. She reached out tentatively, her fingertip brushing against the corner of my eye, catching a tear. Justin, she whispered, are you crying? I didn't answer. I just looked down and chewed harder, trying to swallow the lump in my throat along with the food. A long time ago, I really did like Serena. When she showered the field in roses for someone else, I'd picked one up and looked at the drones in the sky. I'd wondered what it would feel like to have someone love me like that. Then I found out I was being married to her. I knew she loved someone else and I didn't want to trap her, so I gave her those divorce papers. I had seen how she loved others, and I never expected that love to be directed at me. But I'd waited so long. The moment I felt even a tiny shred of affection, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. Don't. Serena's voice was strained. Don't do that. She fumbled in her pocket and pulled out a pack of tissues. What are you so sad about? The streetlights were dim, but her face was clear to me. The trumpet creepers swayed in the evening breeze. I suddenly remembered a line from a book I'd read long ago. Let's not stay here. Come back to 18 with me. Hide under the azaleas on campus, and don't let fate find us. Strange footsteps approached. A moment later, flashlights cut through the dark. Did you find him? The dorm was empty. Someone in the library said he just left. He has to be on campus. Why is he hiding? Does he know something? Quiet. If he really is the Miller heir, we'll have to call him Sir soon. You go check behind the lab. Serena instinctively grabbed my wrist. But we both knew it was useless. No matter where we hid, they would find us. We were always being pushed forward by fate, with no room to retreat. As we stood there, a match fell out of her pocket. Justin, do you trust me? She struck the second match, her gaze steady. There has to be another way. The world spun again. Before I could even open my eyes, Ben was shaking my arm. Justin, did you see the school forum? Serena upset Julian, and she's going to use drones to apologize to him on the field tonight. Want to go watch the show? The second match had brought me back to this day. People are naturally drawn to a spectacle. Last time, the field had been packed. After the show, the ground was covered in roses. Serena had hired people to clean up, and many students took a few flowers home. I was one of them. I'm not going, I said. I thought for a moment and added, you guys should head over early to get a good spot. I heard she bought out every florist in the city. It'll be beautiful. But this time, I didn't want a rose that didn't belong to me. I had 3 months before the Millers would come looking for me. It wasn't a long time, but it wasn't short either. I went to the registrar's office to ask for transfer papers. As the sun set, the drone show began, and cheers erupted from the field. Right then, my phone rang. I met my foster mother at the school gates. She was holding a carton of milk and shoved it into my hands. You haven't been home all semester. Look at you, you're so thin. I bought you some nice milk. Your sister hasn't even had milk this expensive. I stared at the carton. I remembered that in my first life, this was the day I blocked both of my foster parents' numbers. That was why she'd had to use other people's phones to reach me later. Back then, I stood in the cold for an hour listening to her. She'd used a lot of flowery words, but the gist was, I was an adult now, I should start supporting the family, I should give my scholarship money to my sister, and I shouldn't be so selfish as to spend money on myself. This time, I handed the milk back. Her face hardened. Justin, what are you doing? I bought this specifically for you. Do you know how much your sister? I'm allergic to dairy. She shut up instantly. Also, if you came here for my scholarship money, don't bother asking. I looked her straight in the eye. I'll pay you back every cent you spent raising me eventually. But that's it. Don't expect anything else. I wasn't going to let them bleed me dry anymore. You ungrateful brat, she hissed, her fake smile disappearing. I don't want your money. I just came to see how you were doing. Her voice dropped, then spiked again in a self-righteous screech. Besides, you're our son. We raised you. Even if I'm not your birth mother, haven't we been good to you? Isn't it your duty to pay us back? Every cent? You go to college for a couple of years and suddenly you think you're too good for us? You think it was easy raising you? What's wrong with asking for a little scholarship money? You wouldn't even be in college without us. You won't even give your sister a little money for some shoes. Hearing the same speech a second time, I felt nothing. For a moment, I actually wanted to laugh. You're right.
I'm selfish.
I'm a terrible person for not letting you drain me dry. My mistake.
Eva apologized.
You can go now. She raised her hand to slap me, but I caught her wrist before it could land. Think carefully, I said. If this hand hits me, you won't get a single cent from me. Ever. She glared at me, grabbed the milk, and stomped away, cursing under her breath. Luckily, everyone was at the drone show, so no one saw the scene. I let out a breath, feeling exhausted. I turned around and saw Serena standing in the shadows of the trees. I didn't know how long she'd been there or how much she'd heard. When our eyes met, she looked away. I was just coming to talk strategy. We're in this together, after all. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. She saw me looking toward the field. The drones were pre-programmed, she explained. I didn't need to be there, and I didn't bother with the roses this time. I'm filing for a transfer, I told her. I don't know how close the Millers are to finding me, but I'm going to get as far away from this city as possible. If you want to confess, do it now. Don't wait for Julian's birthday. Justin. Serena didn't seem to be listening. She stopped walking. That was brave. After we got married in the other life, your foster parents used to show up at our door. I knew about it. They were never satisfied. They'd take a check and come back for another. They were leeches, and your birth parents were even worse. I'm glad you're fighting back this time. In the days that followed, I worked on my transfer, and Serena worked on her own things. We went back to being strangers. If everything went according to plan, fate wouldn't be able to force us together this time. I still heard news about Serena and Julian occasionally. The rich girl and the golden boy, to everyone else, they were a match made in heaven. Especially since Serena had been so public about her pursuit of him. Did you hear? Serena and Julian got into another fight. That's the third time this month. Last time it was because she lost his keychain or something. What was it this time? Apparently, she wants to stay in the country, but Julian is dead set on studying abroad. Neither of them will budge. They aren't even speaking. I didn't pay much attention to the gossip. Once my transfer was approved, I walked out of the office. I took a deep breath of fresh air. If it weren't for those matches, I might never have known what I actually wanted. I would have stayed trapped in a numb existence, begging for scraps of affection. But I didn't need that anymore. I trusted myself to build a better life. On the day I packed my bags to leave, I took a walk behind the old lab. The trumpet creepers were still there, covering the wall in a blaze of orange. I took one last look and got into the car that would take me away. I've never been good at goodbyes, so I only sent texts to my friends after I was already on my way. My phone started blowing up. What? You're transferring? Justin, tell me you're joking. It's not April Fool's. Why didn't you tell me? Are you still at the gate? I'll come say bye. Which city? Send me your location, I'll visit. I replied to them one by one. The last message was from Serena. I'm coming over now. A second later, a massive truck veered out of control and slammed into my car. My phone flew out of my hand as the car crumpled around me. As I lost consciousness, the last thing I heard was Serena's frantic scream. Justin. Awareness slowly returned. I smelled the sharp scent of hospital disinfectant. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt like they were glued shut. I heard voices, the sounds of a mobile game. Lost again. This hospital's Wi-Fi sucks. Mom, when can we leave? The doctor said if he doesn't wake up today, he'll probably be a vegetable. We can't afford to take care of a vegetable. Then my foster parents lowered their voices. How much is the settlement? $1 million. We aren't signing anything for less than $1 million. I guess he's finally worth something. All those years raising him, $1 million almost seems too low. Once we get the money, we're done with him. Their voices were crystal clear. My mind drifted. When I finally heard someone else, the voice was different. Justin, I regret it. It was Serena. She was holding my hand, her warmth seeping into my fingertips. I spent all those years being bitter about that divorce agreement. I told myself you didn't love me, so I shouldn't care about you. I even managed to lie to myself. You asked me once if I really loved Julian. I've been asking myself that every day since. If I loved him, why didn't I look for him for 7 years? Why didn't we ever talk? Being back in the past made me realize it was just pride. I was just upset that I'd chased him for so long and he never looked at me. I forgot when I started lying to myself. I cooked for you and sent it to your office, but I told myself it was just taking care of a business partner. I tore up that divorce agreement 3 days after you gave it to me. But I told myself I only did it so no one would find it, not because I wanted to spend my life with you. But by the time I realized it, we had already missed so much. We missed 7 years of honesty and 2 chances to fix it. Serena struck the final match. She pressed the burning match into my hand and closed her fingers over mine. One last chance. Justin, where do you want to go? I'll go with you. The sound of crickets filled the air. I slowly opened my eyes. Serena was still clutching my wrist. She looked around, her eyes wide with shock. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating us and the wall of trumpet creepers behind us. Found them. They're over here. This time I didn't run. I stepped out into the light. I was done hiding. The Miller family's security team surrounded us. Mr. Miller, someone would like to see you. Everything after that followed the script. The DNA test, the meeting with my birth parents, the talk about the old marriage pact, the pressure to marry into the Vance family. Serena Vance is in love with someone else, my father said, tapping the desk. That doesn't matter. Justin, only a merger with the Vances can save this company. You're our only son. This business will be yours one day. Can you really stand by and watch everything we've worked for go up in flames? We've looked into your past. Your foster parents were terrible to you. We promise, if you agree to this marriage, we'll make it up to you. I looked at them, my expression cold. And if I refuse? Using a long-lost son's happiness to save a sinking ship and protect billions in assets. It was a bargain for them. My father's face darkened. He slammed his hand on the desk. What do you have to be unhappy about? You think we don't know what kind of life you lived with those people? Marrying Serena is a luxury. We're handing you a perfect life on a silver platter. The argument lasted until past midnight. When I finally walked out of the Miller estate, everyone's attitude had shifted. The butler bowed as he opened the car door. Sir, your room is being prepared. I'll take you back to the school for tonight. Serena was waiting for me on campus. She was sitting on a bench, swathes of mosquitoes buzzing around her. When she saw me, her eyes lit up. You're back? Did they give you a hard time? Before I could answer, she looked down and kicked a pebble. After the Millers took you, I went to see Julian. We talked. I realized I was just obsessed with winning, and he didn't really love me, he just liked the attention. I don't know how much you heard when you were in that hospital bed, but I want to say it again. Somewhere in those 7 years, I fell in love with you. You're a good man, Justin. It was inevitable, but I kept lying to myself. If we can't change the marriage, I just want to know, can you give me another chance? I still remembered that rose I picked up from the field years ago. I put it in a vase and watched it bloom for a week. When it started to wilt, I couldn't bear to throw it away, so I dried it and kept it on my desk where I could see it every day. I looked at her and said, I loved you once too. That rose represented all my hidden feelings, the version of me that was too insecure and afraid to speak the truth. But I didn't need that rose anymore. After facing the pressure from both my biological and foster families, I had found my courage. During the 2 times I'd traveled back, I'd been thinking of a way out. Besides hiding, there was another option. The Millers wanted the merger so the Vances would bail out the company. If I could fix the company myself, the marriage wouldn't be necessary. After 7 years of running the company in my previous life, I knew its inner workings better than anyone. When I presented my plan, my parents were stunned. It's an interesting idea, but you've never worked a day in your life. You have no experience, you're a college student, and we're on a tight deadline. Why should we trust you? Because you have no choice, I said, meeting their eyes. Whether you put me in the office or force me into a marriage, I'm the only option you have. So I'm making the choice. At first, they were hesitant. They analyzed every move I made, hovering over me. But when they saw how well I knew the business and how efficiently I handled projects, they slowly backed off. 3 months later, I led the company to its first major win. It was a small victory in the grand scheme, but it was enough to let my parents breathe a sigh of relief. On Friday, they sent the butler to ask if I wanted to come home for dinner. I knew what they were doing, but I didn't need a fake relationship built on profit. No, I said, and don't bother asking again. Without the merger, everything was much harder. Most nights, I slept in my office. It took 2 years before the company was truly stable. I leaned back in my chair and finally let out a long, honest breath. My phone buzzed. It was my old class group chat. We'd been out of school for a year. Some were working, some were in grad school, and some were starting families. A classmate had just posted a wedding invite. I'm officially off the market. Hope to see you all there. Replies flooded in. No way, dude. Already? Everyone's getting married, and I'm just over here losing my hair over this thesis. Hey, remember Leah Sterling? I think I saw her name in the news the other day. Is she actually a CEO now? Leah was making a name for herself, just like before. This time, since I'd taken over the company early, I'd already partnered with her on a few projects. Yeah, it's her. She's a big deal now. Our class was stacked. Julian won some international award, Justin Miller took over his family business right after graduation. Ben made the national team. Then someone mentioned Serena. What about Serena Vance? The girl who bought us all cupcakes and roses? Anyone heard from her? She's a socialite. She's probably out living her best life until she has to inherit the throne. But I knew Serena wasn't just living her best life. After graduation, she'd started at the bottom of her family's company, working her way up. We'd seen each other a few times at bidding wars or industry galas. We'd catch each other's eyes from across the room. 2 years had changed us both, but neither of us ever spoke about those 3 matches. Every so often, though, I'd receive an anonymous package. It usually contained a small gift and a fresh bouquet of roses. On my desk sat the most recent gift, a little parrot figurine holding a sign that said, "Eat your lunch." On the back was a QR code. When I scanned it, it pulled up a custom menu. I could pick whatever I wanted, and the next day, a home-cooked meal would be delivered to my office. It always tasted familiar. Serena always kept a comfortable distance. If I chose to take a step forward, I knew she'd come running. But if I chose to stay where I was, she'd wait right there. The flowers from last week were starting to wilt, and just before I left the office today, a new bouquet arrived. Roses again. She had good taste, the arrangements were always different, but the roses were constant. A small card was tucked inside. I opened it. The handwriting was bold and elegant. Just for you.